Thank you very much. That also did is knocked out. No? All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us. My name is Quentin Harrell. I serve as a volunteer as the chairman of the Minority Business Alliance. And on behalf of our executive committee, Vice Chair Kay Monroe, our treasurer, Alex Erpy, who couldn't be here today. We're so excited for Alex. He's in the process of preparing to get married. So yay, Alex. And also our chamber liaison and interim CEO of the chamber, Andrea Copeland, who's always holding us together. She's the glue that holds all pieces together. On behalf of all of us, we just welcome you to our March edition of our bi-monthly Minority Business Alliance meeting. We are so happy that you're here for another critical discussion, and we hope a beneficial discussion on this subject of leadership and how it leads to profits. I'm really excited about that subject matter because I've experienced things that actually connect and resonate with this subject. And I really believe that it's going to be a beneficial subject matter for those that are here in attendance and those that will end up seeing us later on in our recording. So the work that we do at Minority Business Alliance is guided by a clear vision. And that vision is a region of thriving minority business owners and professionals. Simple as that. Our mission statement that's guided by that vision is to convene, support, and promote minority business professionals, leveraging local business and nonprofit partners to expand community wealth building. What we offer under that mission and execution of that mission is professional development and training, dynamic educational sessions, networking and resource connections, and then competitive funding opportunities with the partnerships that we have with some excellent organizations here in our community. Today's session is an example of that dynamic educational session. And our impact, when we've identified our impact, when we execute on this mission and we execute on those objectives, a new mantra has emerged from our strategic planning session. And it is simply new knowledge, new communities, and new business. It's new knowledge for our members, new communities for our members to connect to, and then new business. Because at the end of the day, that's what business needs, is more business for more profits. So today, in connection to that, we invited a good friend of mine. I identify him as a strong future partner for us in the work that we do here in Charlottesville, and his name is John Settles. John is a proven leader known for crafting innovative strategies to address systemic challenges, especially in underserved communities. He's an expert in the areas of real estate finance, real estate development, affordable housing, construction management, sustainability, and community economic development. Mr. Settles received his BA in finance from Howard University. He began his career working for the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. In this capacity, he was a financial analyst in the Office of Public and Indian Housing, where he performed financial audits and helped to train resident councils. He worked on special projects on assignment from the Deputy Secretary, including FHA and disposition and community planning and development. As a developer, his company self-performed construction on the majority of their projects. As a part of studying the latest best practices in construction, he began to study sustainability. The list of things that he's accomplished is much, much longer than what our meeting session will allow, so I'll leave it right there. Just wanted to let you know you all are in good hands in this subject matter, and I open the floor for John Settles. John, the floor is yours, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Doing well. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure. So let me just add to the bio, because when people read bios, they always leave out a lot of pieces. So let me first say what that bio also means is I've made a lot of mistakes, and that's where I probably learned my most lessons. Number two, I'm a parent of 3 kids, and so a lot of people don't know me by my bio; they just know me as Jaden and Kai's dad. And if you're a parent, you learn a lot of lessons in parenting. And as I get older, now at 52, I realize a lot of the lessons I've learned around business and life uh, come from my mama's training. And, as much as I respect and love what I learned at Howard University, I realize how much I learned from my mother. So before I go into my presentation, uh, as Andrea put in the post, feel free to ask questions. As I like to say, no question you ask is a dumb question. The only dumb questions are the ones that you don't ask because you're afraid to ask and you don't leave with the answer. So feel free, to stop me and ask questions. I'm gonna give you a lot of information. I pray that it'll be helpful. And so let's jump right in. Can everybody see my screen? Can everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's start with a question to you all. What is leadership to you? Anybody feel free to jump in.
Don't be shy now.
I was gonna say this is a group of entrepreneurs. You can't be shy. What does leadership mean to you?
I'll start off by just saying leadership is, uh, I'd say, someone who consistently puts themselves in a position to serve the person next to them.
Okay, great. So service, great answer. Anybody else?
I would say also being a role
Yeah,
model
I'll say
for others.
that.
Oops.
You next, Kelvin. Go ahead, man.
I'll say that I think a leader is someone who takes accountability.
Okay, great answer. And I heard somebody say role model. I don't know who that was, but that's a great.
That was me.
Okay. I'm showing my screen, so I don't know who me is, but that was a great answer to me.
Okay.
Any other answers?
Yeah, I'd like to add that leaders bring out the best in those they work with, and they are solution focused and strength based.
Okay, I like that. Anything else? All right, so I'm writing those down, and we're gonna come back. We're gonna come back to those. So I always like to start with what's the definition, because I want to make sure that I understand the topic. And so if you break leadership down into 2 words, leader comes from the Old English, is one of the few that's not Latin, but leader comes from Old English, laden, which means to go before as a guide. To go before as a guide. And so my little joke there, men, we have this reputation. I'm not going to say whether it's legitimate or not, but that when we drive, pre-navigation, it's a little different and easier for us with navigation. Pre-navigation, some would not like to plan out their trip and take a map, and they would just say, we know how to get there. And it a lot of times will lead to an argument with their wife or co-pilot who would know they were lost and would question whether or not we can admit when we're lost. So if you take that definition to go before as a guide, and if you're guiding people, can you admit when you're lost? So I want you to think about that. We're going to come back to that. The second part of the word is ship, which is a word forming element meaning quality, condition, act, power, skill, position, or relation between. So that kind of goes back to that, brings out the best in others. So just hold that. This is going to make sense when we come back to it. So the definition of leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. That's how the dictionary defines leadership. Let me go back on camera because I don't want you to focus on reading that. And I'll come back to that. I'm sending you in. Can everybody see me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now let's jump right into it. I didn't hear what you say. Okay. So here's how I start with leadership. Leader of the ship. Okay. So if we say leader of the ship, that basically is the captain. Because as an entrepreneur, and as an entrepreneur is running a business, you're the captain of the business. And so a good captain, I thought about it. My brother actually is a chief engineer on the ferry system out of Seattle. And he also used to sail shipping vessels. So he's a legitimate captain. And so I asked him, okay, what does it take to be a good captain? And so he said, a good captain strives to be calm, compassionate, and fair. And he said, that's important because it develops the confidence in the crew. Because the crew has to have confidence in you, because they never know when you're going to come up on a storm, when you may run into some other issue. So the crew or your team, your employees have to have confidence in you. And good captains tend to inspire everyone to perform at their best. So I don't know who it was, but somebody said, bringing out the best. So a good captain does that. A good captain, and I heard this quote, which I love, so I'm actually put it in the chat, but he says, a good captain educates, but doesn't overcompensate. And I love that. So I'm gonna repeat that. A good captain educates, but doesn't overcompensate. So when I used to lead in corporate America, and you'll find out I like acronyms and philosophies, one of the philosophies I developed for my managers and for their teams was the T philosophy. And what that simply means is my job is to train you and make sure you have the tools that you need to educate you, empower you to do your job, not micromanage you, but then hold you accountable for the results. So that's what I think of when I hear educate, but don't overcompensate. Being a good teacher, making sure your team is prepared, but don't micromanage and don't do their job for them. Let them perform, sink or swim at their own level. Number 2 trait of a captain is to do your homework on the shore. So before the boat ever pulls away, they check the weather, they chart their course, they make sure they have all the supplies, everything they need to be successful on the journey. And they plan for contingencies and emergencies. They pack extra food in case they're on the seas a little longer because they run into a storm. So chart your course, plan your course before you leave the dock. Number 3, let it go. A great captain practices harmony over mutiny. Don't die on every hill, because your people need to not only believe in you and trust in you, but they also need to know that you're not going to nitpick everything, because it's really about the relationship and the harmony of the team. And so that leads into my next point, which is lead thyself. So one of the things I tell my kid is the last 2 letters. What are the last 2 letters of the word overcome? Somebody help me with that. Last 2 letters of the word overcome.
M-E.
M-E, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being a great leader means we have to overcome me. Got to lead myself. So great leading starts with leading thyself. And so leading thyself to me means you take a deep look at who you are, what your strengths, and just as importantly, what your weaknesses are, and where are the areas of opportunities for you to grow, and what could be getting in your way. So one of the best things as the leader you can do is be honest about those things and find people who are strong when you're weak, find people who can do the things that you can't do, and collectively you become stronger. So it starts with leading thyself. So I say leadership starts with me. Next definition is important. How do you define profit? Let me hear from you all. How, what does profit mean to you? How do you define it? It's a quiet group. Somebody help me out.
I thought I would see all hands on deck on that one.
As
All
entrepreneurs,
these
you
money
gotta have
makers in
answers
this
for
group
this
right
one.
here.
What is profit to you, and how do you define it? Okay, he said he's getting a lot of static. Can everybody hear me? Is it my end or is that something on his end?
John, I see Jessica Harris raise her hand.
Okay, jump right in. How do you define profit? Okay, money left after expenses. Okay, any other answers? Good answer. Okay, she didn't raise her hand. All right, so think about that. So the business definition, similar to what Tara said, is what you charge versus all the cost of what it costs you to produce and deliver the product and service. And the reason I highlight all is a lot of times people don't add up all the costs. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, you have to add up your time and your costs, because a lot of times you can think you're making a profit, but if you sit down and you add up all the time that you're putting into various aspects of the business. So if you sell a product and you're not adding up the time it takes you to package that product, to go to the post office to drop it off, to wrap the product, write the note, you're not really adding up all the costs to produce. And so you need to add up the cost to make sure you're profitable. One of the other things that's critical as you're a small entrepreneur is you have to also add up the non-financial costs. One of the things early on, I'm a recovering workaholic. I don't know if any of you all had that problem, but I had to add up the cost in terms of the physical toll. So when I was in my 20s and I was hit my early 30s, I was going so hard, 100-hour weeks, on my businesses, that I stopped exercising. And I looked up and I had gained 25 pounds. So I had to add up the cost and say, okay, this is potentially costing me my health, because I know the statistics for Black men in America. I know I got bad genes, and that is a cost. It's not a financial cost, but it's a cost I had to add up, because I got to ask myself, is this worth it? And what can I do to adjust to make sure that all the costs I'm adding up are still showing profitability to me? That makes sense to everybody? So then the question becomes, how does leadership, the health cost is serious. And a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake. So that's why I say, and I want to repeat, add up all the costs. So, the cost to you, the cost to your family. We see too many entrepreneurs who the cost ends up impacting their relationships. I know a brother who's a successful entrepreneur, but he's been divorced twice. The cost has been the cost of his relationships and his marriage, because he hasn't poured into the marriage the way he's poured into the business. So success on one end can be failure on another. So why is that important? Because our conversation is talking about, how does leadership impact profits? Well, you first got to understand and define how you define profitability. Another vantage point of that is some people take less profits because they define profitability on the impact and how they're able to help others. So there's been times when I've done deals and I gave up profit margin. I'm doing a development and I sell a property to a single mother who can't afford the price that I'm asking. And I purposely give up profit so that I can both make money and make a difference. Let me pause for a second. Quentin, do me a favor. I see questions in the chat. If there are questions or somebody wants me to elaborate, let me know so I don't have to keep stopping and going into the chat. If you would, I'd appreciate that. So you have to define, what is the profit you're looking for? How do you define profitability? Because some people define profitability, as I said, as doing more for others. And that's as important to them as financial profit. Perfect example of that. And I see somebody in the chat thinks, Terry, impact is a great factor. Absolutely. For years, I've been in an organization called Social Venture Network. And, it's an organization of social entrepreneurs. And the co-founder is Ben from Ben & Jerry's. And they early on had metrics other than financial profit, because what they said is, we want to reduce our cash profit in order to make sure all the ends of our supply chain, they're getting a fair price. So those dairy farmers that we're buying milk from, we're paying them a sustainable price. The cocoa beans that people in South America or Africa are harvesting from the trees, we want to make sure they're getting paid a fair wage. So they cut their financial profit to make sure that they were hitting their goals on the other side of being a good supply chain manager and making sure that those down the line were benefiting financially as well. So let me go into the chat for a second, because like I said, ask your questions along the way. Elaborate more on the boundaries and life balance. Absolutely. So as I said, I have 3 kids, you know, one in college, teenagers who are juniors in high school. So as I begin to rethink, you know, in my 30s, as I gained that weight, you know, this is before we had kids. My wife and I, we were married for almost 7 years before we had kids. So when we had kids, I had to reevaluate it, because at the time my wife was doing morning radio. So she was leaving at 4:30 to go to the radio station. At that time, I actually was a senior executive in the banking industry. I ran a mortgage and community development lending division for Fleet Boston Bank, who was like the number 4 bank in the country at the time. And it was, you know, prestigious. I was the youngest, you know, vice president ever, you know, nobody, you know, else black in the company at that level. But I was leaving every day, flying to work again on a train to work. And I had a good job, was making good money, but there was a nanny raising our kids. So I did that for about 2 weeks. And then I was having a conversation with myself on the train, and I said, I don't want a nanny raising our kids. You know, money is not that important to me. And so I came home, I told my wife, I said, I'm quitting. I'm gonna start my own business. I'm going back to being an entrepreneur. Luckily, every time I get the crazy entrepreneurial itch, I got a wonderful wife who supports whatever I do. You know, she said, I'm with you. And I didn't know how long it was going to take me, what kind of runway I needed to create profitability. But what I knew was my priority was my kids. And so that kind of set the tone. So along the way, I've turned down a ton of opportunities. You know, I've coached all my kids' sports teams. You know, as a sidebar, it's a sensitive topic in my house, because with 3 kids, I'm jumping around. So I coached my oldest daughter's soccer team. And then I left to coach my daughter's AAU team. So my oldest daughter still blames me. She says I messed up her soccer career, because when I stopped coaching, the girls didn't want to play for the new coach, so the team fell apart. But I've coached all of their teams, both in school, AAU, and travel. And there's a time expense with that. And so I've specifically given up deals and opportunities because that balance is important to me. Even now today, you know, I'm still running around with the twins who are juniors in high school, splitting my time with them. But I also make sure I make time every day to get out and walk and exercise, make sure I'm taking care of my health. Because once again, I got to a point where I was prioritizing the kids and running around with them over my own health. And as I told you, I got bad genes in my family. So almost 2 years ago to this day, I had a heart attack. And it was because I was, you know, it was during COVID when, you know, I didn't want to go to the gym because I was worried about catching COVID. So I was in the house and I wasn't finding an alternative to the gym, and I wasn't exercising. And so my body told me, your priorities are off, your balance is off. And so now I'm very clear. If I wake up in the morning and, you know, there's an emergency comes up and I can't get my walk in, you know, I will cancel meetings to go do that. That to me, you know, I told you I have phrases and all these cliches I love. So one of my other ones is what I call daily disciplines. And daily disciplines are the things that I got to do every day to accomplish the goals I want to accomplish. You know, another one of my cliches or phrases that I created is called connecting the dots. And so the dots, you know, I created this acronym DOT. And so the dots are my desired outcome. The T changes. So I start with my desired outcome this year. And then I have to break that down into daily tasks. So if I have a desired outcome this year, what is my desired outcome this month? What is my desired outcome this week? And what is my desired outcome today? Because I got to connect those dots. I can't get to my goal at the end of the year, just like I can't get to my destination if I'm driving or I'm captain of the ship. One, if I don't know where I'm going and I don't have markers along the way to tell me if I'm on the right track and I'm on the right schedule to get there on time. So I got to connect those dots. And so my desired outcome this year, my simple first desired outcome is to be here. Obviously, it's all God's decision, but I got to do my part. So because my desired outcome is to be here with and for my family every day, my desired outcome of today is to get in at least 45 minutes of exercise. That, after doing my affirmations, my meditation, my prayer, that is my second most important priority. So I literally will cancel a meeting. I wasn't gonna cancel on you all, so I made sure I got my walk in earlier. But I also build time in my calendar. I've moved from starting my day as soon as I jump up. Now I don't book my first appointment until 10:30 because I've learned at 52 to allow room for Murphy. So if somebody's late and I got to run them to school, or I got to do something, I've got time to get in my devotional period, my exercise before I start my day. That's my daily discipline foundation of my day. So hopefully that answered that question, Ms. Moreau. And yes, impact is a great factor to consider. I think impact is equally as important as profit, because the more impact you make, not only will your customers respect you, but your employees will respect you. Okay. And so there's two sides to this. So we're going to talk about, two aspects of it. The first aspect is, everybody familiar with Steve Jobs and Apple? Does everybody know that he got fired from the company early on after he founded it? So, and if you don't, put in the chat, I'll tell you a little bit about the story, but I assume everybody knows, so I won't go deep into it. But he got fired, run out of the company that he co-founded. And what happened was the company began to lose money. And ultimately it got to the point where the board said, we have to bring him back because we thought we could put somebody else in here and the company would make more money than it was making. It was actually losing money. They figured that leadership change would turn it around, but it actually got worse. And when they brought him back in, at that time, the company was barely making a profit. And at the time he died, they went from barely making a profit to having $200 billion in cash in the bank. Barely making a profit to $200 billion. And if you read the case studies, what people realized is he hadn't made a profit yet because he had a vision of excellence. He had a vision of innovating products that nobody had seen before. So it was a longer lead time to get to the iPhone and the iPad and the AirPods and iMusic. So he had a vision, and he also had an inspiring leadership style where people wanted to come work for Apple. Engineers wanted to be a part of this innovation. And so Apple, when he came back and they gave him the runway to execute his vision, it took off. And I'm sitting here right now in my little area, I got 3 devices. My kids probably have 5. I don't have the AirPods. I just got the little, earphones that come with the thing, but they've got the AirPods, the Apple Watch, the iPhone, the iPad, the Macs. And so all of that is simply the result of leadership, vision, and execution. Juxtapose that with Blockbuster. Does anybody remember Blockbuster? I know some of you all who are younger might not remember. So, I told you I'm old, I'm dating myself. So when I was a teenager, there was no Netflix. There was no, HBO. If we wanted to watch a movie, we either went to the movie theater or we went to Blockbuster, which is a retail store, and we rented. And at first it wasn't even a DVD, it was a Betamax. So we had this big old machine and we'd go rent the tape. And if it was a new movie, you had to get there early because they only had like 2 copies of it. And whoever got it first come, first served, they would check it out. And so a lot of times you were standing there waiting for somebody to return the movie just so you could rent it. Blockbuster had thousands of stores around the country. Every wealthy neighborhood had a Blockbuster where you could go and rent that movie. Blockbuster's leader at the time had a chance to buy this new fledgling company with this company called Netflix. And he said, why would anybody buy this company? Who's going to want to watch a movie on a computer? That's ridiculous. We got this format, and I'm gonna give you double leadership. So he was, couldn't see the vision and didn't buy Netflix. And then Viacom, which was a major media company then run by Summer Redstone, he didn't see the vision, so he bought Blockbuster for billions of dollars. I don't know the exact number, look it up, but you'll see he paid a ridiculous amount of money for Blockbuster. Didn't buy Netflix. And within 5 years of buying Blockbuster, they were bankrupt and the stores were closed. Leadership and vision matters. As a leader, the most important job for you is to set the vision for the organization, but also set the culture. Perfect example of culture. I know they've run into some problems. Southwest Airlines. Forget about the recent problems they had around Christmas, but for years, Southwest Airlines was profitable when other airlines weren't profitable. Some of it was the business decisions they made, which we'll talk about a little bit, but they also, like Disney, they only hired people with a certain personality. So when you come for an interview, your experience wasn't most important. What was most important was your personality. Were you funny? Were you outgoing? And so people thought it was crazy when Southwest Airlines, in the late 70s and 80s were hiring people and they were letting their flight attendants joke, during boarding and during takeoff. But it became such an experience that people were going out of their way to fly Southwest because of the employees, their personalities, and the experience, even if it meant them not having an assigned seat. Even if it meant them having to get there early to get a car to determine when they would board. People were willing to give up the certainty of a seat for the experience that was a part of the culture that the leader set. Culture matters. It's the same thing with Chick-fil-A. If you go into Chick-fil-A or Burger King or McDonald's, there's a difference in the employees at Chick-fil-A. They smile a little bit more. They're a little friendlier. They call you by your name when you put in your order. Everybody agree with that? That's an intentional culture that's been set. Employees are a critical part of not only the customer experience, but with retention. One of the things we used to measure in the financial industry, so my first management job, I was the Washington, D.C. sales manager for Wells Fargo, and totally different company. When I was there the first time in 1998, we had a leader CEO named Dick Kovacevic. And people used to study Wells Fargo because we had an average of 7 financial products per customer. And it started with them getting a mortgage. So they would get a mortgage. And while they were getting a mortgage, we would hook them up with a credit card. We would pre-approve them for a mortgage. So we would go ahead and pre-approve them for a car loan or refinance their car loan. But it all started with the customer experience. If they had a good experience in their first transaction, which is normally the mortgage, they would be more likely to do business with us again. And that was something that was preached, incentivized, and that's how you were judged by. You were judged, as a financial professional by how many products did your customer have? Because the argument was if your customer gets multiple products after the time they engage with you, that means they had a great experience and they got a great perception of the company. Fast forward to the new leadership that came in 2016. I'm sure you all know the story about the bank accounts and all that, because it changed from a customer and employee-driven experience to a numbers-driven experience. And where employees didn't feel inspired and empowered, they in turn felt pressured to hit certain metrics. And so under that pressure, you had employees doing things that were out of character. Same institution, difference in leadership, difference in culture. When I was there under Dick Kovacevic, by far the #1 mortgage lender in the country. And I mean, it wasn't even close. We were 60, almost 70% of market share. The next 9 top lenders combined didn't have the market share we had. Nobody else had the level of cross-sell. It was leadership and culture. So those are just a couple examples. I could go on. leadership and culture matter. So if you want to talk about how leadership affects profit, those three things I want you to take away. It's your vision, it's the culture you set, and it's how you treat people. The Gallup organization has done a number of polls, and who would guess what's the number one or number two reason that people stay with an organization? Vision. Yeah.
Their boss.
Say it again.
Their boss.
Their boss. That's number two. Good answer. Number one is, do they have a best friend at work? Number two, does their boss care about them? Do they feel appreciated by their boss? So if you want your employees to give you the most, you have to give them the best. That's one of the things I used to tell my managers. You have, think about what you would want to be done for you, the golden rule, do that and more. But do it from a genuine sense of caring, not with expecting something in return. So, has anybody heard of Attila the Hun?
Yes.
One of my favorite books I read earlier in my career was Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. And so, you know, Attila has this perception of this monster that does all these horrible things. You know, most of it is not true, but what's missing in there is what made him such a remarkable leader. And so they tell this story in the book because it was a great honor to be in the army of Attila. He didn't take everybody. It was a great honor. And if you were a soldier in Attila's army, you were respected. So they tell the story in the book of this mother. Her son was going off to be in Attila's army, and she was wailing. She was crying, and she was so upset. And her neighbors came to comfort her, but they said, "Why are you upset? This is a great honor." And she said, "It's a great honor, but I'm crying because I know I'll never see my son again, most likely." And they said, "Why do you say that?" And she said, my husband and my two oldest sons served him, and they all died on the battlefield. And the reason that I have a high degree of probability he's going to die is Attila's men are willing to die for him because they know that he's willing to die for them. Unlike most leaders, he fights at the front versus in the back. He's on the front lines. She also went to tell the story of her husband. He was bit by a snake on the battlefield. And Attila personally got down from his horse, took a knife, cut open the area where he had been bitten by the snake, and sucked out the poison himself. And his men saw that. So his men were willing to fight for him and die for him because they knew that he would do the same for them. Do your employees, do your business partners, if you don't have employees, do they feel like you appreciate them, you value them, and that you would do for them in a time of need what is needed? That's really leadership. Next thing I want to talk about is questions that you must answer regularly as a leader. The first question you have to answer, and you have to answer it with certainty to your team, is, where are we going? They have to know where they're going. Number two, and this is not your opinion, you have to be able to succinctly answer the question, do they feel they can trust you? So you have to take honest assessments along the way. And you've got to build that kind of relationship where your employees will be honest with you. If they're afraid to be honest with you, then you have a problem as a leader. Because if they won't tell you, trust me, they're telling other people. So you have to develop, and it's your responsibility as the leader. It's not their responsibility. Let me be clear on that. It's your responsibility. Communication is the responsibility of the leader. And when I say communication, it's not you just talking to them. It's making sure they've heard what you wanted them to hear, which means you have to constantly seek feedback. So you got to be clear, where are we going? You got to be clear that they feel they can trust you. And then the third question you have to ask regularly is, Why should they follow me? Why should they follow you? Why should they follow you versus someone else? You have to have a clear answer on that. The next question you have to ask regularly is, what are the weather conditions? And I'm using weather, as kind of a broad topic. And really what I mean by weather is, what are the economic conditions? I read probably 100 different blogs every day. And so one of the things I'm looking at is, what are the macroeconomic conditions? What are the microeconomic conditions? So I mean by that, what's happening with the banking situation after SB Bank and others going down, and Charles Schwab and others, potentially being next. How does that impact me? That's the macroeconomic conditions. The micro or the local. What's happening in my local market? Where are there layoffs? Where, are there trouble spots that I need to be aware of? So you have to ask regularly, what are the weather conditions? What's the conditions in my industry? Are we having supply chain issues? In the real estate development business, we're having a number of issues. After COVID, we've had a huge increase in construction costs, but we've also had a huge increase in interest rates. And now looking at this banking situation, the reason I'm studying the banking situation is, if banks are fearful of depositors making a run on the bank, or regulators tightening up, because we know regulators tighten up when they think things are difficult ahead. So what is that going to mean in terms of interest rates? We've modeled deals at interest rates of today. Are the interest rates going to be higher by the time we go to get financing? And if they're higher, can we survive that? You have to know what are the weather conditions, and you got to ask yourself that regularly. Do we have enough fuel? Once again, I'm using cliches with my team. Do we have enough fuel? Do we have enough money? Do we have enough resource to survive a storm? Sidebar story. In 2008, everybody knows about the great crash in real estate. Lehman Brothers went under. Most developers went bankrupt. I didn't go bankrupt in 2008. I was okay, because I had been asking myself that question along the way. Do you have enough fuel? So I had enough reserves, I figured, to last me through a 5-year cycle. Typical downturn is 2 to 3 years. I planned for 5. I thought I had enough fuel. Business didn't go under in 2008. It did go under in 2011. And the reason for that is, I had enough fuel, I thought, because I planned for all the development projects I had. What were the payments, the mortgage payments on those to the banks? And what were my pre-development expenses? Because I was self-funding all of this stuff. I built up enough money to self-fund all this, thought I had a plan. But what I didn't have a plan for was, in the end of 2010, the way commercial loans work. When you go to your local bank for like a development project, you get an interim loan, 2 years, 3 years max. So a lot of deals I had signed up in 2006, they came due in 2009. Property values had dropped substantially. Remember, I had planned for mortgage payments, pre-development expenses, my architects, engineers, and all that. What I hadn't planned for is the land value dropping 40, 50%. And the bank saying, the regulators, I literally had a banker call me up and say, I hate to even have this conversation because you're the only person still paying. Everybody else has stopped paying, years ago. But the regulators are making us require you to pay the loan down by 50% or we have to foreclose. So in 2009, I had 4 projects. I had to pay down 50%. Very big numbers that wiped out about 70% of the cash that I had in my fuel fund, as I call it. But I was okay. It's okay if we get out of this, early 2010, 2-year cycle like we should, we'll be okay. Well, we didn't get out in 2010. So at the end of 2010, I was still making my payments, still holding on, there were fumes left in my fuel fund, but I still had a little bit left. And regulators came back into my primary bank because, remember, I was the only one paying. So they were on the brink of getting taken over. So the regulators negotiated a deal with them to sell to another bank. But as a part of the sale, the new bank said, anything that is non-performing, meaning didn't have any income from it. So all this stuff is development projects, that I hadn't come out of the ground yet because of the market. Anything that wasn't, income producing asset, you got to foreclose on. So once again, lender called me up, my primary lender. He said, he was in tears, literally. He said, this is the situation. He said, I've appealed to my bosses because you've paid when nobody else paid. You've done everything that you said you were going to do, and we got to foreclose on you. I said, it's okay. We're going to do that. Whatever you got to do, I know you got to do. So I ended up giving back, all those properties, and then negotiated foreclosure and bankruptcy, because I had personally guaranteed tens of millions of dollars in loans. And what I learned in that situation was always ask the question, do you have enough fuel? Be extra conservative. But also the most important lesson I learned, and I told you, what's not in that bio is what you learn as a parent, mama's things. But then also, if you have a great wife like me, your wife will, give you wisdom. And she said to me about a month before that call came, she said, you were fighting and holding on. Sometimes you got to let go. And you got to fall so you can hit rock bottom and start building again. So when that call came, I was prepared because I heard what she had said to me back in my head, and I let go. I was, from the business perspective, that was the first time in my life I'd ever failed. I'd ever lost a business. I'd been wildly successful in corporate and all the other things. And, I was down for about 2 weeks. Wells Fargo would call me every year and say, will you come back? And so, the previous 9 times they called me, it was like, no. But my former boss called me about 2 weeks after I lost all that and was wallowing around, feeling sorry for myself, blaming myself for being a failure. And I went back, to Wells Fargo, went back to management. And one of the things I learned as an entrepreneur, because as an entrepreneur, 90% of the businesses fail within the first year. 90% of those that don't fail within 5 years. Failure is a part of the process. It's what I call tuition. You learn your best lessons in failure. So don't be afraid to fail. Failing forward, to me, is one of the most critical pieces of leadership. When you fail, pick yourself back up, take those lessons, go back at it again. Some of the greatest entrepreneurs in America have failed many, many times. So I find too many entrepreneurs that are afraid of failing, or they're feeling ashamed by failing. It's a part of being an entrepreneur. So don't be afraid of that. The last 2 things, and then I want to open up for questions. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to know the story of the lion and the gazelle. Some of you may know this story, but I used to tell my management teams this all the time. When you're in sales, when you're an entrepreneur, and really now as an employee, because most employees have to be entrepreneurial employees. There's no longer the same contract of you work for 30 years and retire and get a pension and a watch. That's no longer. So even as an employee, you have to be an entrepreneur. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you eat what you kill, is what I like to say. And I know that sounds horrible, but it's true. You eat what you kill. Nothing in the world happens until somebody sells something. So the lion and the gazelle, the story simply goes, every day on the plains in Africa, the lion wakes up and knows that it has to outrun the slowest gazelle. And every day on that same plain, the gazelle wakes up and knows that it has to outrun the fastest lion. So whether you're a lion or a gazelle, every day when you wake up, you got to wake up running, but you got to know where you're running to. You got to know why you're running. And more importantly, you have to inspire your team to run with you. So let me stop there. Any questions, anything you want to share? Hopefully this was helpful. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Round of applause first. That's Jules. That's Jules all day, all afternoon. Thank you, sir.
My
The floor
pleasure.
is open for questions. I love the chat. The chat has been active, but the floor is open for questions.
And don't be quiet like you were in the beginning. I want to hear from you. Ask any questions.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question, but I like what you said in your last statement about the gazelle has to be faster than the fastest lion. And I think that's something that we could all take from that. When I built one of my businesses, that's one of the things that's kind of the same concept that I looked at. Like I always looked at who was like the biggest dog in the industry. Like I compare myself to them and I say, okay, how do I build a process that is going to deliver more value than theirs and solve the problems that they haven't solved yet? That because to me, so I've got a music business, and to me, Sony and Universal and Warner Music are the best. They're the biggest, right? But there are problems they haven't solved yet, and there are processes that I can build much more efficiently than they can. And so I just like what you said about that, and I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, can take away from that. So thank you for that.
So I appreciate it. So let me add this. The gazelle, unlike the lion, not only has to wake up running faster than the fastest lion, but they also have to know where they're running. Because if they're faster than the fastest lion, but they're running in the direction of the rest of the pride, they still have a problem.
Well,
So that goes back to knowing the weather and knowing the macro and micro. So you got to know where are the trouble spots and don't run to those. And Kevin, to your point, so Warren Buffett says he only invests in companies that have a durable competitive advantage. And so I love that, and I want to make sure everybody understands that. So durable competitive advantage, because as a small entrepreneur, one of the things you have to understand or be honest about is big companies don't have to be as innovative. They can steal your idea or they can make something similar, and they have the money to execute it. Perfect example of that, we talked about Apple and the iPhone, all right? Google didn't create the concept of a cell phone. Google saw what Apple was doing and they created the Android. They had the money to kind of create it and copy it. They have built a robust business, but Steve Jobs, go back to what I talked about, his vision. His vision for the iPhone, he's been dead, over a decade, was so great that while Google has been able to take market share, they haven't been able to overtake the iPhone, because the iPhone, the vision and the innovation for it, and the branding and all the little details that Steve Jobs influenced in it, created this durable competitive advantage. So what you've got to look at is not who's bigger, but one, you can be more nimble. What are some of the trends on the ground? What are the young people listening to that maybe you can infuse in your music? But what's going to be your durable competitive advantage? And the music business is hard because, what's hot today won't be hot tomorrow. So the Quincy Joneses of business, they're able to adapt with the sound of today. He's such a musical genius that his hits span multiple generations. He was able to move from, what he did in the 50s, what he did in the 60s, even the 70s, and look at what he did with Michael Jackson in the 70s with Off the Wall versus in the 80s with Thriller, and how he adapted and changed the music, and still nobody has sold the kind of albums that Michael Jackson sold because of the kind of music that Quincy Jones was able to put together. So he customized it for Michael, but also for the sound of today. So you got to be adaptable and have that durable competitive advantage.
John, I don't have a question. I have a statement as well, like Kelvin. Are there any questions though, before I make Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious about any suggestions or tips in terms of working within the Charlottesville ecosystem, like as a minority business owner, entrepreneur. What are some things to consider, look out for, any wisdom there?
Great question. Unfortunately, I can't answer it. I drive my wife crazy because I make decisions at the last possible moment. And the reason for that is I tell her, you may get better information, you may get better intel. I am in DC, I'm new to the Charlottesville market. I don't know it. And so what I've learned is until you really know something, don't form an opinion. because you may have incorrect information. So unfortunately, I can't help you there. Only thing I would say is, and Andrea Copeland is wonderful. She knows it. So I think my suggestion would be to talk to people who are in the know and network like crazy. Because, one of the jokes I like to say is, it's not who you know, but it's who knows you, and there's a lot of times people say, oh, I know such and such. Yeah, but do they know you? Do they call you when they're looking for somebody who does what you do? And that's what you have to get to. So unfortunately, I don't know the Charlottesville market enough I don't want to give you bad information.
Yep. So it's our goal. It's our goal for Minority Business Alliance. And that's why he's on this call. We're trying to plug him into this market because we need as many bright minds and minds outside of the area to actually see some of the things that when you're in the area, sometimes you just get used to and don't really see. So that's a great question. And I would just suggest to you is to complement what John said, Risa, is just to get it connected to as many networks as you can, because getting connected to those networks actually helps in the educational piece. And one of the most important educational pieces, I believe, is gaining new perspectives that feeds the wisdom that you already have in you as an entrepreneur. So it's basically, and it goes back to that, our mantra: new knowledge, new communities, new business. So I think we're on to something there, Kate. New knowledge, new communities,
Business
equals new business. Indeed. I want to sneak this in. Hopefully someone else has another question. It's only 1:02. We got to 1:30. We know we may not stretch it out that long, but if there are that many questions, let's do it. But I wanted to say how I wanted to first thank you, John. Thank you for dropping so many jewels. It's resonated with me so very much. Part of my thought process of bringing this subject matter to the table is because I went through a bankruptcy in 2008. I lost almost everything back then. And what I attributed to in reflection, because that bankruptcy, that pain, guided me back to go get my business degree. I had dropped out of college twice as a young person. And so after having a business career and accumulating a couple of properties, and having this so-called good life and success, I ended up losing it all because I had some missing components. And one of them, in retrospect, after I did get my degree, is not really understanding what leadership is and what it can mean for your business. I had got my business. I had a clothing store here in Charlottesville, and I had got it up to where I was getting close to grossing $500,000 a year. But in 2007, I felt that something was going on, but I didn't understand macroeconomics, and I didn't know how to make the decisions. And I felt like I needed to open other stores in other cities, but I did not have the leadership skills to open those stores. I didn't know what to do. So that's why I know that leadership can actually really lead to more profits, because you need more people that believe in your vision in order for you to achieve bigger and larger goals.
Absolutely. Let me go back, and say two things, and so that goes back to checking the weather. So you have to know, what are those broader conditions, but also within your industry. And that's extremely important right now because the winds are blowing right now. And I don't say that to make you fearful, because, and you look it up, don't take it from me, but studies have shown that some of the best times to start a business is during a recession. Some of the best times for small businesses to grow in periods like this, because what do big corporations do in times like this? They slash budgets. They cut people. They cut back on things. Service goes down. So if you step in and you're able to fill that service void, I'll give you another example because it really just comes back to service and brand recognition. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. Nordstrom was selling collard greens for like $70 a bag. Everybody remember that? Google it.
Nordstrom's?
Nordstrom was selling collard greens, and it was the same collard greens people could get in the grocery store for $5, but they were paying. Google it while I'm on here. Call me out if I'm wrong. You know, I'm good at admitting when I'm wrong. It was $60 or $70 for the same collard greens you can get in the grocery store, but people were buying it there because they felt like there was some, you know, panache with Nordstrom's collard greens. Same greens. You know, there's nothing you could do with a collard green to make it, you know, worth that much more except put it in a different bag.
It was a brand. They
was the-
paid for a brand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Daniela has a question.
Yeah, thank you, John, for your presentation. It's really good. I'm working for a nonprofit, but the nonprofit have had to be run like a for-profit. You have to look at it like a business from business perspective. You cannot lose money. My question is, in the beginning in your slide, you had, I think, a question, can a leader basically tell their employees that he doesn't or she doesn't know where to go or have no idea, something like that? And maybe I missed it, but you wanted to come back to that. Does it sound familiar?
Yep. And I'm going to put it back up. I'm going to put it back up on the screen now so everybody can see it.
And I'm curious about that.
So I think what you're asking is the questions that you must ask regularly right here, right?
It was a little bit more further in the beginning, I think. Leadership. Can a leader, something like that, if a leader doesn't know where he's going, what they're supposed to do, basically, something like that.
So
Husband example.
well, yeah, I was going to say it's either one or two, but basically, let me say these two things. Number one, even if you are the subject matter expert in your company, people, your employees, when I say people, I'm saying your employees, they can tell when you're not confident where you're going, you don't know where you're going. And so one of the key things, remember I said the captain of the ship, I got on the screen, you know, you've got to be calm. Even during the storm, the captain can't show panic, because if they show panic, all the employees are going to panic. So they have to be confident that you know where you're going and that you can navigate the storm. Because if they don't think you can navigate the storm, what are they going to do? Jump ship. Right?
Yeah.
I'm only staying on this boat if I feel like you know where you're going and I'm confident you can navigate the storm.
Right. Yeah.
And so the way I used to always tell my managers and the way I used to deal with my managers is I would over communicate the vision. And like a time like now, I'm doing it with project teams, but if I was still in management, and I do this with some of the financial leaders that I coach, I'm telling them they have to acknowledge to their team that they're in or going into choppy waters, that they have a plan, but they also know that they may have to change course. And if they have to change course, they will communicate with them what the change in course is and why. And while they may have some unknowns, they are out there checking the weather, making sure they got enough fuel, and making sure that the employees are informed of what's going on. That's normally what it takes. And the last thing I used to tell, when we have big meetings and my managers and their direct reports would be in there, you're safer on the boat with people that have enough fuel that are at least thinking about these things than jumping out there on your own if you don't have enough fuel, if you don't have a plan, if you don't know where you're going and what's coming.
Mm.
And during these times, we actually would add staff. Because I would say when everybody's cutting back, go out there and hire the best people. So you have to see it as an opportunity. It goes back to vision. You know, if you play cards, you know, I made it through Howard, even though I spent a lot of time playing spades. And anybody plays spades know the best spades players, they can make a hand even when they don't have great cards. And a lot of times it's just the vision and the skill of how you play. So hopefully, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it sounds like, because my question is kind of leads to how much transparency you give when the water is rough, you know. So that I think is a little bit of a challenge. Do you include, how far do you include the employees or the staff so that they feel confident, but they know this is a rocky time, but they don't need to know every detail? Because
they don't need to know every detail, but they need to know it's a rocky time. And why do they need to know that? You know, number one, they may be able to help come with some solutions.
right.
Number two, they see the water. They're nervous anyway.
True.
And so they're talking about it. Remember I said, you know, you may not be talking to them about it, but they're talking to other people about it.
That is true. Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
Social media now, everybody knows, you know, the economy stuff is going on. So you want them to hear with you. You want them to know that, you know, you've got a plan and you're working on it, but also too, you want their input and their suggestions or how they can help in other ways.
Mhm.
You know, one of the other ways, so we'd have honest conversations, you know, back then is I would say, okay, rates are high. And I just coached one of the people I coach, who's a manager in the mortgage business. And I said, listen, be honest with your team, especially your processors, because in the mortgage business, they tend to fire processors at the first sign of a storm. And then they try to come back in and hire them when volumes are super high. So go tell your team, you're going to try to hold on to everybody and not fire anybody. But what you need them to do is figure out ways that you can cut costs or make more money. And so I gave them the specific example. Tell your processors, normally when times get turbulent like this, you're the first ones to be laid off. We're not going to lay you off, but what I need you to do is talk to everybody you know. So I need you to be a part of the sales process. Let everybody know you work for a mortgage company. Let everybody know we're still in business. Let everybody know we can help you. And if you bring in clients, I'm going to pay you a bonus of 20%. So you'll get a little bit extra money. But two, by you bringing in clients, is helping me to help you stay employed.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, very good.
You're welcome. Quiet group. Any more questions?
Damien,
I-
did you have a question? Yeah.
I had a question, but I think you kind of answered it. The question.
Remember, only dumb question is the one you don't ask, and then later on you go, man, I should ask that question.
For sure. No, I think you kind of honed on it pretty well. The thoughts I had was just pertaining to, which I think is kind of the underlying notion to a lot of these points, is just being able to build a like kind of talking about a transparent yet productive culture in an organization. And the question I had was just asking for just your experience and just tips on be ways to move forward in developing what that culture is before you get to that time where you have staff, where you have employees, you have people that are working around you. Just thinking about things to be kind of looking at when it comes to how you are yourself, positioning your business as well as, you know, the things that you are pursuing. I think I recognize more and more that, you know, when it comes to developing and building a culture, it's not something that I have to wait on, like wait for people to come before those things are starting to be fleshed out. So just looking for more insight on that. And I think a lot of the things that we're talking about regarding, um, preparing the ship and being able to really recognize what's ahead and seeing how you can kind of develop that vision for it is a really cool practice, as well as a good insight for when people begin to come on to the ship with you. So I think that whole analogy is a really good visual of, kind of putting your perspective beyond the task that's right in front of me, but being able to see, where we're heading and how to kind of develop, like purposefully developing those things. So that way, when people do come on, you have a little bit of a plan, and it's not catching you by surprise. So I think you shared a little bit of that. If you love to add more, feel free, but
Yep.
definitely some things there.
So let me add this. You got to do the culture before you grow, because one, that's the number one mistake I think entrepreneurs make is they're trying to build the plane while they're flying and they haven't put their infrastructure in place. And it's very easy to crash when you haven't done it. But also remember, go back to Southwest. They knew the culture they wanted, so they only hired people that fit that culture. Herb Kelleher, who was the founder, his differentiator, his durable competitive advantage. And it's crazy because people even know that, and they have not been able to match the culture of Southwest in terms of, their flight attendants and their pilots and their personality and the jokes they tell, while you're boarding and while you're landing. So they knew the culture they wanted, and then they went out and hired people that fit that culture. If you don't know the culture, you won't necessarily know the kind of people you need to hire, and then you can make hiring mistakes. And that's a killer for a business, especially a small business, because bad experiences, bad employees can almost be irrecoverable in certain situations. So you got to be able to define that culture, and good or bad. So I'll give you another example. For a while, they taught it in business school. Now they say it was a problem. Jack Welch, when he was CEO of GE, his culture was a culture of growth. And his culture was a culture of production and efficiency. So he added business lines to GE. When he took over, they were just basically a light bulb appliance company. Then they got big in the aerospace. They got big in financial services. So he grew, and what he tasked his managers were every quarter, you got to grow your profit. And he fired a lot of people. So that's why he gets a lot of flack now. Now his argument, he said, listen, people that couldn't produce, they couldn't outrun that fastest lion or that slowest gazelle, I helped them move on rather than having them sit here, waste some years and ultimately get fired or the business go out of business. So their culture was a culture of high-powered growth. So if your culture is high-powered growth, what do they have to do? Go out and hire A-type personality people, right? And those people built businesses, and he set the standard. Now, the one thing I would argue is he messed up, Wall Street, because now most companies can't meet the every quarter. Just think about that. Every 3 months, your profit is expected to increase. So he set that standard. And now a business can be a great business, but if they have a bad quarter, their stock goes down. That's the Jack Welch effect. So you can argue with it, but he had a culture. He hired people that fit the culture. He put systems in place that fit the culture. And for all the years he was at the helm, every quarter they grew their profitability. So you got to define your culture, and you got to get people that fit your culture and buy into the culture.
I'd like to add to that point while somebody formulates another question. But I learned a life lesson and a business lessons from Jack Welch as well, regardless of his controversial tactics. And it was about, I saw a lecture that he did, and he was talking about hiring people as well and making sure you have people with matching value systems. And so in life, with your life partner, as well as someone you bring it into your company, if they don't have the same value system, share the same values that you do, they can be a superstar. They can be super talented, You know, you interviewing them in the hiring process. You like, this person is awesome. They check all the marks on the resume, but if their value system doesn't work in your organization and its culture, you will be making a horrible hiring decision, and they could eventually become a cancer in your organization. So to that point, to Damien's question about that, you know, setting the culture, you have to stay true to that and be disciplined when you're building your team. And so I use that in building my home team too, and I found Miss Harrell in that case.
Yeah, and so let me jump in and give you an example of that. In construction, you can have a great tradesman. You can have a guy that knows roofing inside out. You know, can look up on the roof and tell you how many squares it is and how many layers are on there. But if your culture is safety, and I had a guy like this, master technician, but he didn't value the culture of safety. So when we're saying we got to meet OSHA, if you go up on a roof, you got to be strapped in, and you got to have the safety harness and all that. I don't need the harness. And so he actually was infecting the culture. So I had to let him go because I can't afford to have somebody fall off the roof. You know, you may be skilled, you may be crazy, but if you have people that are a little less experienced up there following your lead doing the same thing, it can lead to disaster. And so once again, you got to know your culture. You got to know what I call your no matter what's. Your team has to know. So I always have no matter what's. No matter what, we're going to do this. We can control. This is how we roll. And you got to be able to clearly communicate that to your team. So if the standard is not met, when you're having a conversation with them, they can't say they didn't know.
Great. Any other questions? No? Wow. Well, my question to the group is, has this discussion been beneficial to everyone in attendance?
Very much, very, very valuable information. Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
Outstanding.
Congratulations on standing in your truth.
For
Outstanding.
sure.
Outstanding.
Thank you for taking the time.
I'm very happy because this helps us to reinforce and support our mission and those four objectives that I talked about earlier, that Minority Business Alliance seeks to execute in our vision and in our mission, and it's professional development and training, dynamic educational sessions, networking and resource connectivity, and competitive funding opportunities. And I believe this has been a dynamic educational session. Our team's primary objective is to simply create more value for our members. So I wanted to just let everyone know that we are a member-driven organization, and membership fees are the lifeblood of our organization. So we encourage you to join or consider joining MBA, or tell a friend or a family member who's starting a business that's interested. There's an organization that wants to get them connected with the right people, get them connected with the right resources, or get connected to information that helps them to thrive in their business model. With our partnership with the Chamber, we provide a very manageable discounted rate of $240 a year. Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, but $240 per year for minority-owned businesses and organizations. And as a member of MBA, you're automatically a member of the Chamber of Commerce and get all the amenities thereof. So shout out to Andrea and the Chamber staff for all the support that they provide for the Minority Business Alliance. And if you wanted more information, you can check us out on Facebook or the cvillchamber.com/MBA. Earlier in the text box, you also we had John to put a link to his business website in the chat box. So I encourage you to copy the chat box, or just go and copy the entire chat box. But you can go and copy his link and go check out what he does under the umbrella of Rewire, because the coaching is outstanding. Our mother sister, Kay Monroe, she's a coach as well. I'm pretty sure that things have resonated with her, and I'll pass the mic to her to see if she had any closing remarks before we all take the handcuffs off you and let you go for the day.
We are officially unhandcuffed. I really don't have too much to say. I thought it was extremely useful. I've taken lots of notes. One frame of reference, love when he used Motown, and then Michael Jackson, and he talked about the sound, or knowing the sound. But I would add to that same music that we heard back in the day. We heard it on a DVD, we heard it on a CD, then we heard it on MP3. And Nat King Cole, you can get the same music today on an MP4.
How about that?
Same sound, different delivery. Think about that. So I just want to kind of leave you with that one right there. How are we delivering what we have? And then lastly, to put emphasis on a couple of dates, please save the date. I can't give you other information except to give you that opportunity to save it on your calendar on Friday, April 21st. The MBA, along with other local community partners, will convene for the downtown Tom Tom. I think it's a Friday festival block party. We did it last year. We were all outside the Code building. It was a wonderful time to network, share information about our networks, and just kind of have a good time on a Friday. So more to come on that. And then in the works, an MBA and Black Professional Network convo. We are looking to network, possibly hold a date Wednesday, April 26th at Belmont Pizza. I believe it's a happy hour. Is it like from 4:30 to 6:30 or something like that? Am I right, Q? I think I
Well, we're
got
still
that
working
right.
out, the times and confirming the place, but we just want to get back to doing something that BPN started years ago called Working Wednesdays. Did these socials where African Americans and other folks in our community can get together and connect and create new relationships. So we'll get back with you all with more information once those details are ironed out.
So watch the calendar, watch the newsletter. Our girl Andrea is going to make certain everything gets sent out. If you need anything from us, just hit us up, inbox us. We're here to support you, and I certainly wish you well in the coming weeks until we see you again. That's all I got.
Deuces?
Two things.
Oh.
Deuces. Yeah, peace out. One. Our next meeting is May 23rd at Ting Pavilion. MBA is partnering with the Business Women's Roundtable, and we're going to have a fun day of leadership activities. We had a great time last year, and so we'll be back at Ting Pavilion this year. Come on out and join us. Fun day of learning. And secondly, the Spring Live, our Chamber Spring Luncheon, our first in 5 years, will be held April 26th. At Holiday Inn on Emmett Street. So come on out and support that. UVA football head coach Tony Elliott is giving the keynote address.
Outstanding. Thank you for all your attendance. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your engagement. We look forward to connecting with you on the next rebound.
Yes.
You all have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.